On this episode of Vital Conversations, a Doc Talk community series, Dr. Tamang sits down with Rapid City Mayor Jason Salamun to discuss critical local issues. They explore housing, homelessness, and city expansion while also diving into the philosophy of local government. The conversation extends to state politics, touching on school vouchers, short-term rentals, and the leadership of South Dakota's new governor, Larry Rhoden. Tune in for an insightful look at the challenges and decisions shaping the region coming up on Vital Conversations.
Thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah, I've had a chance to talk to a couple CEOs in the city, and I asked them both, what is the most important thing the city could do to help you achieve your mission? So we're talking like community health centers and West River Mental Health.
Yeah.
They both said housing is their biggest issue. And I would love to start with that and get your take on the housing situation here, what we're doing about it, where it stands, and your feeling going forward.
Well, you know, I think with the migration surge we've had the last several years, that put us in a great housing shortage. And obviously, we all know that had a lot of ramifications. All of our home values went up. You can't find a house. Our property taxes went up because the market values went up. And so we had this huge influx of people, so you started seeing more multi-units being built, apartments and such. And I hear that all the time. Boy, we got apartments coming up everywhere, and you need that. You know, for some folks aren't going to own a home. Some people are in between homes, whatever the case may be. So we did quite a bit to assist in that. You know, we have a strategic housing fund that the city has in place through the Black Hills Area Community Foundation.
It's fantastic.
Yep. So we were, able to do that. That's a revolving fund. So as that pays back, it goes to the next project.
Yep.
I think that's good. The other challenge we had, though, with building new homes is the lack of contractors and subcontractors, because simultaneously we have a massive project happening at Ellsworth Air Force Base that is eating up a lot of the subcontractors especially. And we feel this as a city because we have, infrastructure expenses and things like that. We're having a hard time getting all the bids we used to get for a while. I'm going to tell you, things are shifting. I always say today is not 2022. So we have a narrative that we have in mind from a couple of years ago. We assume that's true today. I think we're seeing that open up a little bit as more and more homes are now coming online, and we are able to start we're not caught up, but we're getting closer to caught up. The problem is we're going to still continue to grow, whether it's the B21, and we have a lot of businesses interested in coming here, and we have even more, we have businesses that are already here looking to grow and expand. And so a big part of that, obviously, is housing. You need housing of all types. Here's the other thing I've learned, Dr. Tamang, is you have, and there was a housing study some years ago that shared this with me, and you have like the median income housing and what kind of supply you have there. Then you have kind of the affordable housing, of workforce housing, and then you also have kind of premium housing. And one of the unique things they said is we probably have enough at that time, probably not true today, but enough inventory in the median income housing. But the problem is there isn't enough entry-level housing.
Yes. And
there isn't enough premium housing for people who can't afford it, and that's on the other side. So because of the inadequacies there, it gobbles up the middle. So people who can't afford as much are now house poor. Those who could afford a whole lot more and probably want it, but decide, I'm going to go gobble up, this middle income, people like me or whatever, homes. So that hurts that inventory. So it's interesting. There's an ecosystem. The more you have, whether it's apartments or, my first house, by the way, first-time home buyers have also high expectations. I didn't have a garage, until like 2015. I bought my house in 2002. So I raised my kids basically without a garage and in a split foyer house and whatever. And then we could afford more, and we ended up getting a big old expensive house. And then we're like, this is too much house. And my wife and I downsized and right-sized is what we call it. Now, you have expectations on that end, but you also have the premium housing, and there are folks, whether it's caregivers or business owners or whatever, that can't afford more, want more, that are often building their own, and so that's happening a lot. They're custom homes, but it takes a while, so thus they will take up inventory as well. So what I think the city can do is try our best to get out of the way. that's not in the way. I mean, there are rules. Everybody has to play by the same rules, but we want that to be better. But, if you see the economy shift where interest rates get lower, fuel costs get lower, all that impacts our ability to build homes. Like, it's not a willingness or anything like that. Is literally dollars and cents. So that's why you see a lot of multi-units, because it's very expensive to build one house when you could build an apartment if you're a developer.
Right. I think one of the things that I was most impressed with the first thing you brought up was the Black Hills Area Community Foundation and their project. And I believe that has a piece of Elevate involved with it as well, right?
Well, I think, there's a lot of stakeholders involved in those. That's one of many.
Right.
Talking about.
Tell me about those.
Well, I think you'll see each come up. But when we put the strategic housing fund in place with Vision Funds, this is several years ago, I was back in my time on the council, then you have projects that apply for those funds. And these are at lower interest rates than maybe they can get at the bank, or maybe it's gap financing, those sorts of things to make these things come to life.
Yes.
So you will see, a variety, and I don't have the list in front of me. I think there are several right now underway. You'll see a variety of those. But as those pay off and they pay those back, that goes back into the fund to reinvest into the next project.
Brilliant. That's great.
Yeah. So the other thing the city's trying to do, I guess, is, speaking of the Vision Fund, is, I've proposed significant changes to our Vision Fund and how we've done it in recent years. Now, that Vision Fund was put in place originally by the voters for civic improvements and economic development. That's what it was literally called. And so I really wanted to get that Vision Fund over the years has gone to more and more private entities, tens of millions of dollars. And I really thought, this is taxpayer money. We need to get it back to the taxpayer benefit and use it for public projects. One of the things I proposed that the council approved was something called the Strategic Growth Revolving Fund. I know that's a mouthful, but kind of like the housing fund. But this time, what if the city puts in the infrastructure first? So right now it's on the developer. If you build a project, the developer, and it's for good reason, builds the road, water, sewer, gets all that in place so that homes or businesses or whatever can go there. We have thought, what if we start to be a little more proactive and say, grow here, and put that infrastructure there, and then that'll help spur growth in whatever that area is going to be. And so sometimes it's going to be commercial growth, residential, mixture of both, could be industrial, all sorts of growth. So we're also looking at that. So those are things that we are trying to be proactive on. And thankfully, the council has approved that. This is going to be over the course of the next 5 years.
Do you think we're going to dig out of the deficit we're in the short term? And again, I think from my perspective, and I think my perspective is skewed, obviously, but it looks much more towards the lower socioeconomic status. Like, where do you think we're at right now? And I don't know if there's any way to know for sure, but my gut feeling is we're in a pretty big hole there in terms of having enough affordable housing for folks. And I think everything I'm hearing shows that we're doing a lot of things that are smart that are going to get us out of it. I'm just curious as to your stance on, like, where are we at right now? And I know it's impossible to predict, but do you see us getting out of it? Do you see the path at this point, or is it still nebulous?
Well, our growth is at such a rate right now that it's going to be hard to catch up. Just when we get there, then we're going to have trouble. So, the pandemic, which brought a lot of migration growth because of the quality of life and lifestyle we enjoy here,
yes,
brought a lot of folks here. Well, we knew there was a shortage for the growth we did know about. That is the incremental growth that we naturally have on top of the growth we would experience due to the expanding mission at Ellsworth Air Force Base. Mm-hmm. And then suddenly all these people showed up and we're like, whoa, and they cash buyers.
A lot of wealthy people.
Yeah, it really upended the market. Now you're seeing houses are on the market longer now. So that's what you have to look at. How long are houses on the market? And that has slowed down. Not slowed down to like a terrible pace, but we're kind of getting like to a normal pace. But I don't expect that's going to stay because we will continue to grow. And if you know anything about growth, even if we had incremental growth at this point, it's incremental growth on top of a larger population base. So that means we needed many more thousands of homes. And you're also seeing surrounding communities. So Rapid City is not the only place to build a house. You will see, Somerset and out in the county, Box Elder, places like that. They all are also seeing an influx because some people want to live in certain environments. It might be cheaper to buy, a fresh plot of land outside of town, whatever the case may be. So I think you're going to see a little bit more of that. Well, you're seeing it now. You're going to see more of that moving forward, where I think you'll have housing in Rapid City for sure, but you'll also have housing that are happening outside of Rapid City, and to that end, we'll do the best we can, but it's going to take. All of these communities are going to have to, adjust course. We just got to be quicker. One of the things I think I've wanted to implement in the city is more giddy up. I should call that a core value. I say it so often, but I said I only have a limited amount of time to do something here. So I have a sense of urgency every day. Whereas, if I was like, well, I have a 30-year career, I may not have that sense of urgency because you've been there and done that. And I don't think everybody has that. There's plenty of giddy up within the city, but I've just said it, even in our processes, our approval processes, we got to do things responsibly but reasonably.
You mean bureaucracy gets in the way?
Well, it happens.
Yeah.
It's the nature of the beast. It's not any. I don't even think it's intended.
No,
it's just.
It's the opposite.
Any large systems, the hospital which you work for will have the same thing. It's inherent. It's inherent. It's inherent. With large systems, and the city is a large system, and complex systems with lots of rules and laws and opinions, and we work in the public. So trying to speed that up when you get a permit, when you get your engineering reviews, when the timing of communications, you can't have, and the longer it takes, and we had prices going up, so the longer something would take, the more expensive a project would get. And so in our house, in the city government, we're trying to make sure we're moving towards more efficiencies and effectiveness. That's all we can do. Ultimately, it's going to be up to the private sector and the free market to really decide this housing shortage.
For sure.
It's a supply-demand issue.
And I think there's, one area I'm interested in your view on. As a city entity, is there any opportunity for innovative projects that are potentially grant funded from a federal level? Can the cities apply for various things that could develop housing options? Is that something that's being thought of? Maybe that's not even a thing. I don't know.
Well, first of all, as we speak, all grants I think are on pause right now for a review.
Yeah, wasn't that something?
But we have actually someone on staff who applies for grants all the time, whether often federal or state grants.
Yes.
And so, for example, last year the state had some housing funding that they put out towards new development, but it had to go through municipalities, so we had to be a part of that, recommending those projects to the state. So we were kind of a go-between with that. Federal funding would depend. With these grants, by the way, I'm all about what are the strings attached.
There's always strings attached.
I will not sell the soul of Rapid City for $1.
Right.
That is my thing. So the staff have gotten really annoyed with me saying, what are the strings attached? And if I don't like it, I don't even want to bring it forward. But there are many things you can do. For example, even the cost of housing, and also once you have a house, the cost of living. So your insurance rates. Yes. Where is the nearest fire hydrant and fire station? That matters because did you know your insurance rates are greatly factored in by whether there's responsive fire times to your place. So do we have that in place? And as we grow, are we putting new fire stations? Do we have fire hydrants in the appropriate places? That's called an ISO rating. We have one as a community, but also as individuals in your homes, you have that. Well, that affects your rent and everything else. And we've done things like, hey, can't we help out landlords more? Well, listen, you have to know that if it's expensive for a landlord, it will be ultimately expensive for the tenants too. So I have to be careful about unnecessary bureaucracies.
Downstream.
Everything we pay the price on a lot of these issues. Grants potentially, and we often do look at those. We've applied for some with regards to housing. There'll probably always be more. I definitely want to be careful of what we are selecting, though. I think that's, you want a good partner in your community whenever you do grants.
For sure. And
that includes for the housing. But frankly, I think you're going to see it be a supply and demand issue. And as long as we can incentivize growth and development in a healthy way in this community, and I really want to see infill development. There's a lot of older neighborhoods that could use rehabbing, that could really turn into better places to live.
Right.
And I think that could be a big thing too.
From my perspective, there's a huge need for housing on the lower end. Unfortunately, the folks that are potentially trying to get into those housing aren't playing by the traditional market forces. They don't, they tend to have a lot of social barriers that, for whatever reason, they're not able to participate in the market. So it really kind of dives into the transient homelessness market. And I think that's the struggle that a lot of us in healthcare, certainly in the social side of healthcare, deal with. And so that piece of Pennington County has a fine program to try to help, with the voucher system. It's just completely overwhelmed, as you would expect it to be. But kind of the safeguard for lower income housing, and it's interesting. I've never heard the argument before that the middle gets gobbled up. I think that makes a lot of sense. So from your perspective, maybe it's about just making the whole city more robust, and then the lower end sort of takes care of that piece? Or is there anything in particular that stands out to you for that group?
Well, first of all, not everybody needs to own a home. People might think this is weird. I mean, I grew up pretty poor, so I've been through quite a bit. I think more mobile home parks that are responsible. I think there's cheaper ways to live, apartments and duplexes and things like that. I think are great because it gives you a place to live that you can afford. And that, to me, should always be part of the discussion. There's even a great development happening right now just east of town where they have these, they're not a tiny home per se, but they're like one-bedroom homes.
Yeah.
And one level, and it's really pretty cool and very energy efficient and all that, which, if you're a first-time home buyer, even like I have young kids who are, my daughter and her husband are graduating college in May and they're going to be teachers. Well, maybe that's an option for them down the road. But, or if you're just a single mom trying to make ends meet, that might be an option. I think that to me, we have to be okay with that. Everybody wants to build big developments. And I think there's definitely a place for that. I'm really big on neighborhoods. I just like having neighborhoods. The city is a community of neighborhoods, and that means in that neighborhood, I'd love to see neighborhood elementary schools, neighborhood parks, and access to things that people need. Whether it is on the low income side or the high income side, I think that all of that is good for our community. But I also think we have to take care of what we have. We have, for example, pretty significant issues going on at Star Village, a neighborhood here. Should be a great neighborhood with the views and stuff and location that they have, but we're trying to work with that out-of-state property owner to help make things better, and we are in touch with them now. And because it creates a lot of issues when you let things go that you already have, then it creates this sense of lawlessness, and they call that the broken windows theory. If you don't clean up the broken window, you let the little things go, the big things, you can't be surprised when those happen. So we have to constantly be on top of that as well. So I think all of this has a role and a place, and I think that that's okay. But the idea that everybody has to have, like I said, own a home, which was a big push there for a little bit, is big. Now you wanted to talk a little bit about those who are experiencing homelessness and stuff. I know there's been a big housing first thing that people have looked at, but I don't
Doesn't
agree
seem
with
to
it.
work.
Yeah, it's a great book called Michael Schellenberger. I forget the name of the book off the top of my head, but he did a study of this in California, and it's well intended, but it fails.
Yes.
And it really so I'm not about that at all. And by the way, the city doesn't have a housing department in a sense like the county does. The county is responsible for the housing stuff, so they do the voucher program through them and everything. Same thing with Health and Human Services. We go through the county. We work with them, as you know. But so the city doesn't offer all those services because we already have it with the county. We're not going to do redundant things. And so I think continuing to work with them, and I think Pennington County Housing has some thoughts. They own quite a bit of property actually, and I think they're looking at what they can do to better resource that for those in need.
Right.
And I think that would be a big benefit as well.
Tell me about safeguards for homelessness when a citizen in the city finds themselves either through, whatever logical, illogical means they find themselves in those situations. Where do you see the city's roles and responsibilities and programs from that standpoint?
Well, I can tell you what the city is doing.
Yeah.
Doing more than we've ever done before, and that's going to surprise people because I have kind of a tough love approach on this. But, well, first of all, I think the goal is that everybody, you and I and anybody, whether experiencing homelessness or not, the goal is that you would be able to take care of yourself, whatever that is. I think that should be the ultimate aim, that you're able to take care of yourself. But there are reasons and situations why that's not possible. Sometimes very legitimate, sometimes by choice. And I think the next level is if you can't take care of yourself, you hope there are loved ones who are there to help take care of you. So if something were to happen to you, I bet you have somebody in your life who would take you in. If there was a fire that burned down your house tonight, or you went bankrupt because of medical bills or whatever, you probably have somebody in your life or multiple relatives, friends, and family. And this is what's missing today. We don't care about each other. Yeah. We don't care about our own family, And listen,
Intimate
I got
social networks.
And listen, I got strained family relationships too. But my kids will never experience that, because as long as I'm alive, even if I have not much, but a studio apartment, they can sleep on the couch.
I think you'll be okay.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. You'll run me out of town here eventually, but that's a joke. But anyways, so I think the family unit and the loved ones and friends are the next level of protection. And that's broken down in our society. And I believe a lot of our cultural breakdowns are there. So then you hope that there's short-term shelter for people who are in need. Here in Rapid City, we're fortunate to have that, whether it's Cornerstone Rescue Mission. We have safe beds at Care Campus, but you also have places like Wavy, who does a lot with women and children as well. There are a number of places that are available to folks who are in need. And you also, though, realize that many of the situations that we're in are due to factors such as addiction or mental health. And so you want there to be effective mental health treatment and effective treatment for addictions that people face. And you're an expert in this, so that obviously you're right there. So you want to have those services to help people get out of this situation. My goal, and it's stated very clearly, is to reduce homelessness in our community. Meaning I don't want that for you. I do not want you to live on the street. So we don't allow camping, and those sorts of things. And we know it happens, but we try to get people to the shelter. I don't think it's safe for the person who is camping. And I've said this repeatedly many, many times, but I love you enough not to let you hurt yourself. So I will not give you a Snickers bar and a sleeping bag down by the creek and feel really good when I go home. But the next day I read a headline, someone died of exposure for falling in the creek. And that has happened. Mm-hmm. And that sort of thing, I think, is not accurate. And so we had a recent cold snap. We had city employees out there, whether it's our mobile medic from our fire department, quality of life unit from our police department, park rangers, partnering with organizations like Journey On and others who are out and doing cold patrol, finding people to get them to shelter. You had people working for the city government who are saving lives. Nobody will give them credit. They'll blame them when they think they're harassing them or whatever, but they went and saved lives and got them to the warm shelter because it was bitter, bitter cold. So we're trying our best to keep an entire community safe. And I have to think of a whole community. So I'm very careful about empowering, not enabling, loving, but I think our definitions of love sometimes are very different. It's kind of like parenting styles. And so I certainly have an approach that we want to help people get out of that situation, and I don't want to be more attractive for that situation.
Magnet.
Well, yeah. It's the challenge because if you build, let's say you needed 200 beds today, and you build the 200, you're going to end up with 300. Okay, well let's get the 300 beds. You're going to end up with 500. It's never ending. We attract people not even from our area. These aren't even our people.
Right.
These are, West Coast people or whatever. And sometimes I'm like, where are these people coming from? They're not even ours. So that has been a challenge. And, you go to, and that's, by the way, all that's a symptom of larger issues. I don't actually believe we have a homeless issue. I believe it's a symptom of deeper issues, come from addiction, which addiction then you could say is a symptom of other issues, but I believe that's downstream issues. It's a reflection of a culture. And it's not even one specific type of people groups, because all over the United States, you have different types of people experiencing homelessness. I'm a veteran, and there is the trope about, the homeless vet, and it doesn't mean every veteran is homeless, but it's a trope. It impacts the entire country, impacts us here as well. So we put, directly, we have a couple of $1 million going towards homeless services out of our budget, and our budget's $100 million. I mean, that's a big portion of our budget, and indirectly a whole lot more if you want to talk about police, fire and parks and all of the things that we've had to deal with.
When you described yourself as tough love mayor, I follow this probably as close as anybody from a citizen standpoint. That's not my perspective. I've seen funding going into strategic places that are smart. I think there's a perception that you need to do a lot to help people, but there is a lack of insight and understanding what actually moves the needle. This has been true from when you mentioned the housing first crisis, or the housing first idea, towards the idea of just enabling people to stay in a park, which is not a very good long-term solution. So smart strategic investment to move the needle is what we need. And what I'm hopeful that the city is able to do is when you have a patient, or when you have a citizen, I should say, who has reached the level where they're like, I can now manage some degree of responsibility. I have gotten to the point where my life is together enough where I can pay my mortgage or pay my rent or whatever it may be. I can maintain some form of activity that provides some degree of income. My hope is that the city has a spot for that person. And then when they're not in that role, my hope is that the city has a spot for an emergency shelter so that person has the basic human dignities. And I think that's what I've seen more recently. It's been, I don't know, maybe there's, I get the sense that the mayor or any public official, they just get attacked irrationally all the time. And so I imagine you kind of get this kind of knee-jerk response, it's like, no, I am tough love. I don't see that. I see a very compassionate side of this. I see Journey On being funded, which, if people don't know, they do tremendous transportation and coordination of homeless care. I see the shelter with Cornerstone getting funded. They are the emergency shelter that provides so much good. And then I see this discussed constantly. So,
tough love isn't not love. I think it's kind of like love and logic. Okay. And when I say tough love, it's more on probably the enforcement side of what we have to deal with. Like, no, you're not going to camp. I love you too much to let you hurt yourself. That's what I mean. It's the same thing. No, I'm not going to let you play in the street, Johnny. I love you too much, but you're so mean. I hate you. Well, that's fine. You might hate me, but I love you enough not to let you do that. That's what I mean by that. It is always, you always have heart. My faith is pretty strong, and everybody knows the command of love thy neighbor. So I get hit with that in kind of weaponizing empathy in a way. And I say, and I have to, I've always heart checked that and said, okay, am I off course here? I believe there's a role for government, but there are things that government shouldn't do, than others try to do. But you also it's complex. So when I talk about, okay, no, we're not going to allow this for the sake of the entire community, that's not the place to be. At the same time, you want there to be places for people to go. And now I don't necessarily think the city is the best to provide for all that, but we do fund a great deal of that. We fund for case management for Volunteers of America and Great Plains Tribal. We fund drug prevention programs like through Lifeways for young people, because I think starting there would be a big help. Prevention, treatment, and accountability. All three those things have to happen at the same time, and we need prevention efforts. I think that could be better. Treatment efforts, and you have to have accountability. Like you can't just, all of that has to be true at the same time, and you can't just hope for it. You got to work for it. So we should be strategic. You talked about that. I think if there's a dollar, where can that dollar do the most good in the community? So, for example, you mentioned Journey On. They're a strategic partner. So long as they want to partner with the city, why that's good for the taxpayers is not that we aren't just giving money to Journey On and say good luck. We actually have a contract with Journey On for services to help reduce our call volumes and assist with these things that otherwise more expensive police officers are taken care of.
Yes.
They should be dealing with law enforcement issues, not a medical issue.
Well, and it's so important for other reasons too. They tend to have a very large Native workforce, which is pretty skillful at de-escalating certain situations that perhaps law enforcement would have a tougher time with. Oh, and full disclosure, I'm a volunteer for both Journey On and for Cornerstone. But but back to the point, I think the city's doing a lot of really good work in the area, and I think housing, the reason I wanted to focus on it and spend time on it is because I think that's what your citizens, your business leaders, at least through my conversations, they're the ones that are saying, we need help on that piece, because we frequently will get a client to that level and then it's just a struggle. So maybe keep that in mind as things develop, because I think that's a big piece. And, population's interesting too. Like, we've been on a boom cycle, and presumably, and I think for the good of all of us, we'd like to stay on a boom cycle of some degree, but there can be regressions too. Mm-hmm. And so the housing issue, I don't know if that would really help us, because then there's no more money, but we'll see what happens. But it's nice to see the city's looking forward in that regard, and just trying to make sure the housing kind of gets caught up. If it's okay, I just wanted to kind of touch base on a few things city politics-wise. Is that all right?
Let's go.
The city council, that's something that I didn't really have much experience with till last year. And I think that's just because if you're not really engaged, it's kind of this nebulous thing. Do you mind just explaining that? I think some folks from Monument are probably listening to this, and they probably don't have a sense of the city council. Real high level, in a nutshell. Can you just tell us about that?
Yeah, well, so I'm the mayor, and the people have elected me to lead the executive branch of the city. Well, the city council is the legislative branch of the city. They're like the equivalency to the state legislature or Congress. And so they have two primary functions. They make laws and they allocate funding. And those are the two big things that they do. And every once in a while, they are put in positions where they have to arbitrate between disputes. I say a lot of these issues are always land issues. It's always funny. Well, I want to do this on my property. Yeah, but it has a negative impact on my property. Who's right? And that council will have to kind of, serve as a function of making those decisions at times as well. So, anyways, I think it's important to understand the function of the council, and when everybody stays in their lane, it works really well. I try to work with them because I can't get a law passed without their support.
And who are these people? How do the people become this? Yeah. Is it a hard thing to do? Like, just some of the nuts and bolts, I think.
Well, I served on city council for 6 years. Yeah. And essentially, and these are important local elections that have the lowest turnout, but have
important.
Probably the greatest impact on your actual life.
I've figured that out.
Yeah. And so it's critical. So we'll have an election coming up this year. 5 of the members are out for re-election. And so that election will be in June, along with some school board elections, the school is separate from the city. I should always note that, even though we have interest in it. So we have 10 members of the city council, 2 from each ward of the city, each section of the city. So you have 5 wards. You have 2 representatives for your ward. So if you live in city limits, you have 2 representatives on the city council that you can go to with your concerns or your thank yous or your suggestions, whatever the case may be.
Your rage and
complaints. And I always say you don't get on city council for the fan mail. It's a tough job. Most people who are on city council, they have other jobs. So this is a part-time deal, but it literally has endless work. Like, we have people that are retired that say, I'm working more as a council member than I did in my normal day job I retired from, because it just never ends. It's just always something. So So anyways, we don't have enough people running for office either. I think more people should run for city council.
I do too.
All of these races should be competitive. I was hearing about the 72 flood from the former mayor Barnett, and he talked about his council being the best of the cities, whether it was professors or business owners or whatever the case may be. And I think it's good when you have a wide variety of perspectives on the city council. And obviously, as long as they agree with me, I especially like it. But so, a council member will look out, for concerns with their constituents. They try to make sure we do things on budget. They have to make hard decisions from time to time. And those are the ones that have to make the paper. Not every meeting has really hot button issues. They're about to have another one here soon. And those are challenges. So they're trying to hear all sides, and they're really making a vote. And it's tough because you're trying to weigh the community as a whole versus an individual or a business. And some of these decisions can be really difficult. I was on the city council during COVID, and, I took, and that was a challenging time. And, I trusted everybody's intentions, but you could see our approaches were just very different. Of course. And very divided. I mean, 50-50 divided at that time, like our community was. And, and I was on the side of keeping businesses open and no mandates, and there are others who wanted to do that because they thought it would protect lives. And there's a lot of information floating around there. It's hard to make decisions, so you really have to know who you are, why you're here, where you're going. It's really a gut check time. And and I think council has been put in those positions. Sometimes we'll have issues. I think one of the other controversial issues that we've had to deal with that has not really been settled is backyard chickens. Do you allow hens in your backyard? I'll tell you, we got just as much feedback on that as we probably did. I think COVID is the only thing that outlasted. I think that's number two. Passion on all sides on that. So I came out and said, I think I'd be in favor of trying that. Well, my constituents told me no. They were, overwhelmingly. I said, I think there's more education that needs to be done because it's done in other places, but our community was not ready. Or I was kind of open to it. So that surprised a lot of people, but I was. And now I'm sharing that again, but I don't think the council wants to take it up. So you have to really be able to do things like that. But a lot of them have their own priorities. They're elected to say, hey, I want to see a stronger police force. So I want to get more funding to police. That they might be elected for that reason. Maybe housing is their passion, and so we do things like tax increment financing, which are incentives for these housing. To get back to that, we do more than anybody. Nobody incentivizes housing more than Rapid City does. So it's like, how much more can a city do? But you have people who are passionate about that on a city council. Right. So you're coming in with passions, but you quickly realize you have to understand where the city is so vast, so much going on. You can't be narrow-minded in the sense of like you can only care about the one issue. There are many, many, many issues. So even the council members I disagree with, and there have been plenty, one thing I think we all have this respect on is we're willing to do that. It's a thankless job. I think you should thank your council members. You're the boss, yes, but I say be a good boss. And that will encourage more great people to run, or else if great people don't run, what are you left with? Yes. And so I think somebody's listening to this that's like, I wonder if I should run for city council. I would say you should. Do it. You should do it.
And here's the thing. As far as I understand, any law-abiding citizen of age is
18 and over in the city limits of Rapid City.
So it's pretty big net.
All you need to do to get on a ballot is get 50 signatures. So in March, at the end of February, beginning of March, you'll go to a city finance office. They'll give you a packet. This is an election packet. It gives you every instruction that you need on what you do, but you'll form a committee. It's just filling out some paperwork. You might have to raise some money. Some races, though, you might put your name on the ballot. You're the only one there. You don't have to do anything. But really, you need 50 valid signatures to get on a ballot. I always recommend you double that. But that is all you have to do. Yeah. And then you have basic meetings you show up for. There's the council meetings and committee meetings. Those are the bare minimum, but there's so much more in between. When you're dealing with issues, listening to constituents, there are other committees that you can sit on. It could be arts or humane society or whatever. There's a slew of them.
That's so important that engaged people that have insight and experience consider that, because I think a lot of people don't even know about it. So that's really neat. And back to the housing issue, you guys are probably going to look at this vacation house rental situation at some point. That's a
short-term
topic.
rentals.
Yeah, I'm interested. Do you think Rapid City is going to have a policy on that before too long?
And this is, by the way, if you don't know, this is like Airbnbs and those sort of things. I think we should allow them. I don't think they're going away at all.
As a consumer, I love them.
Yes, I've used them, and I've had to talk about this many times. There's a lot of varied opinions, which is why the city is looking at it, because we have council members who really want to see some strong regulation. We have others who want to see no regulation. And you have a community that's also equally divided. Just go ask anybody in West Boulevard. In West Boulevard, you're going to get two extremes. Love them. I have them. They're great. And the others are like, they don't belong here. So you're going to have both happening at the same time.
Yes.
So I'm a big believer that they should be allowed. I think we have to make sure there's proper guardrails to protect the neighboring properties, whether it's parking. There are other ordinances currently, I think, that do apply, but maybe that can be strengthened. They have to be permitted by the state. So I think one thing that some within the city want to do is say, hey, we want to make sure we know everybody who's permitted by the state to own a short-term rental. But right now the policy is you're allowed 2 weeks of vacation home rentals a year. And we've had that for ever and ever, probably with the rally and everything else. A lot of people do that. That's always allowed, unless you live in an HOA that supersedes the city stuff. So your HOA actually will have some jurisdiction there, which is unfortunate, but for some. But the argument against short-term rentals is, one, the argument is it takes up our housing supply. The other argument is it has some will say it has negative impacts on neighborhoods. However, when you look at long-term rentals, I think it's hard to compare that to short-term rentals, because short-term rentals are usually reviewed. You're choosing who comes and goes. So I find those properties are usually nicer.
Well-maintained.
Yeah, I think.
Those reviews are painful if you're not well-maintained. Yeah.
But there's somewhere between 700 and 900 short-term rentals in Rapid City, depending on who you believe.
That's interesting.
I don't know if it's Rapid City or the Black Hills area, but it's a lot.
Yeah.
Now, Deadwood went so far as just to outlaw them altogether.
Is that right?
Yeah. We aren't doing that. I won't sign that. So they're having an open house, and they've had this committee with people on all sides kind of working through some of this stuff, and even including people from Airbnb. I literally talked to an executive from Airbnb, and I said, what's worked everywhere else? They're like, yeah, we have a template. We'll help you guys. I was like, okay, great. Be a part of that. I don't know how that's been going. I haven't been in that meeting. It's kind of a community conversation, but my position has been very clear. I will not support anything that doesn't allow them. I think we need to make sure it's done responsibly. That would be my only thing, just to protect the property rights of your neighbors. So I think you have property rights to have a short-term rental, so long as it doesn't negatively impact the property rights of the person next to you. This is always where it's at. So what that is really where, I think the rubber meets the road, so to speak, and where the kind of debate will be had. I mean, there are people who want to outlaw it. We get calls into our office all the time about those. We get complaints all of the time. I'm like, well, we're going to have to prove that's more than 2 weeks. I mean, unless you're going to sit there and watch it and monitor that. So we've been kind of hands off, to be honest with you, because it's really hard to prove.
Oh yeah.
Unless I spend, thousands of dollars having a staff members really
not super realistic.
Yeah, I don't think it's a good use of resources. But the argument is it takes up housing supply, to go back to your other part, and that's been another factor. And I'm sure it has. A house that used to be a first-time homebuyer house is now a short-term rental.
Right.
I do have some concerns about how many properties or how much land out of state people can own. So I'm a little concerned about these large groups coming in, gobbling up 1,000 homes for short-term rentals in our city, and don't really care what happens.
Especially when we're already stressed.
To me, I think that might be where some of the regulations potentially could come in. Like, that should be allowed, but is there a degree? Should there be a cap on that? How much, someone not in our community can own in our community, and that's a tough one because they also have some property rights. There are other laws that do that, but I think to me, I think those are good discussions to have. So it's a healthy discussion.
Yeah. This is why he's joined the city council. You might get to weigh in on some of these things.
Well, yeah.
Everyone's
the
got
city
an
council
opinion on this.
will be the ones deciding this at the
Yeah.
end of the day. They either decide to do nothing, to do something and make them allowable, or do something and not make them allowable.
Yeah.
And if you have everybody who ran for city council not want them, you would not have them. But, you have to understand, we have a visitor community here. They do expect it. I am not going to be a hypocrite and tell you I haven't stayed at Airbnbs. Sometimes it's the best thing to do.
Yeah, especially if you got a big family going or multiple families going.
I've even done it in the hills where I rented a cabin once, and it was great. And I think there's a place for them, and I think they're often maintained well. So I'm on the side of I'd like to see them continue. That is not everybody else's opinion, though. So I would
good,
just say,
healthy debate.
Yeah.
Let me switch gears to I would say the purpose behind this whole series. Monument Health, we're a health system, obviously. We want to stay in our lane, but we also want to be a health system for the community, particularly for Rapid City. From your perspective, what can Monument Health do to be a good partner to the city, to be better in certain areas, things you would like to see it expand in?
Well, I want Rapid City area to be a regional healthcare hub. I want us to be the go-to place with everything you would ever need. And that means being a great place to live so that caregivers want to come here. I think that's a big part of it. I'm very fortunate to have a great relationship with your CEO. She weighs in on a number of topics, gets very engaged on everything from economic development. If we're trying to pursue a business, she wants to see that grow too. And I think that's good. We need to continue to invest in educating caregivers, whether it's nurses, and bringing more education out here, post-secondary education, whether it's not just nursing schools but probably medical schools and those sorts of things. I'd like to see more expansions out here, and from what I understand, I think that's going to happen. Providing excellent service to our citizens. The thing is, I want the reputation for Monument Health and any healthcare system, but Monument Health being our largest one, that when they go into the system, they are well cared for. That it not just skilled. I think that's a big part of it. You want to have skillful caregivers, physicians, but also just the experience. Experience is a thing that, and this when you go in a restaurant, you got to appeal to all five senses, and it's a great experience. I just went to a restaurant last Friday. It's like the amazing place. there's so much about it. The food is good. It smells good. Well, I went, and I don't know if I can endorse anything, but I'm just going to say, my wife and I went on a date to Makawali, and it's outstanding Mexican food. And they, we go to a lot of restaurants, so I don't want to single anyone out because, we'll go to Port 54,
compliments
Firehouse, and Dakota Steakhouse, and all of there's so many great ones. But you go in, okay, it feels good. The temperature's right. The smell's good. The food looks good. The atmosphere is great. You're appealing to all five senses. Well, that's what you create an experience with. Anybody who does anything, you do that. So I think with Monument, having just the experience of being in Monument and appealing to all five senses with that great customer service, responsiveness, great attitudes, smiles, I think not having to share a room would be great.
Yes.
Those sort of things that I think we all want.
Yeah.
It's just, it's getting there. All of that, I think, is if you provide a great experience in addition to
skillful.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a non-negotiable.
Yes.
Non-negotiable is the caregivers. And frankly, all of my experiences have been positive. I know everybody has different experiences, but I've always had great experiences there. And today's my daughter's birthday, and I was just reflecting on running. Where did I go? I took her to the hospital. Took my wife to the hospital when her water broke, and my daughter was born at that hospital. At 10:31 p.m. And the nurses and the doctors there wasn't a Monument Health doctor. He was our doctor, but he's there, and those relationships with the medical community as a whole, because people don't realize the partnerships that Monument Health has. Not everybody in Monument Health is actually an employee of Monument Health.
Right.
There's,
the hospital has a lot of people that come to it.
It's a system. It's very vast. A lot of networks. I think I'm encouraged by the relationship with Mayo Clinic. I think that is good. And a lot of people I know, they're great people there. Continuing to get better is the best thing they can do, and to become world-class and really showcase that.
Are there any areas of medicine? Are there any spots that you hear that, whether it be core things, like I know we've worked a lot on our Heart and Vascular Institute, and I know we've worked, a lot in other aspects, but some people are tourism medicine. Is there anything else that comes from the service line side of things at the city?
Well, I think pediatrics, when I say that, I mean, we do a great thing with Children's Miracle Network, and Ronald McDonald House would be great to have. But I mean, there's some real specialty pediatric things that I think I'd love people not to have to go somewhere else for. Occasionally I'll hear that. We're talking completely different states. And I think keeping kids near their families is important. So I would like, to see an emphasis. But you're also going to have to go where the needs are. So you have an aging population. That's probably where a lot of the heart stuff comes from. You have cancer wreaking havoc, strokes, and all these kinds of things. So I think having those big time services that you can do here, because it gets expensive to go somewhere else because you have to stay there. A family's got to get a hotel room or whatever, or however all these things work. In my mind, creating that kind of ecosystem would be good. Now, there are always specialists are always going to be the challenge. I remember one time we had a shortage of urologists or things like that. And what I asked the hospital, I say, what can the city do is like make it an even better place to live. You know what? If you get a Chick-fil-A here, it sounds funny, but you have to, we're recruiting, a specialty doctor, and they have a whole family, and they want to have the things that they're used to from wherever they're leaving from. And so if you can do that stuff, I'm like, okay, that's
right.
Our end of the deal is trying to make sure that we have this community that, frankly, it's a remarkable community.
So I'm hearing you say competency, excellence, customer service.
Oh, yeah.
And just keep trying to get better.
I think improvement all the time and telling that story. And I think your biggest cheerleaders should be your employees.
Yes.
They should have so much pride in working there. And so when you have healthy leadership and healthy culture, that'll lead to healthy teams and healthy people and outcomes, because you're serving people for the health of everybody else. So I think about that too with the city. I think there's many great people in the city working for the city. Every day I'm kind of blown away with the service. Do I see improvement? Yeah. We have need for improvement in a lot of places. I always say we're not where we used to be, but we're not where we're going to be. And we're going to continue to improve and make this better. And it might be challenging, and any large system is going to have that. And I think that'll be huge, is having that pride of service and what you do. Everybody who works in Monument Health should be very proud of what they're doing. Imagine our community without them. These hospital systems are easy to take for granted, but I cheer on the success of anybody who wants to improve healthcare in the Rapid City area, all the way around. I think it's good. I'm all for it, and will champion that as much as I can. Continuing that excellent service with skills that are superior, that will be the best thing that we can do.
A corollary to good healthcare with the city is access. And one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was public transportation. I think a lot of us are sort of separate from it. I don't think we have a good feel for it, but I'm sure your perspective on public transportation is quite a bit different. So you have you've dial-a-ride, and then you have the regular bus sort of route, is my understanding. Can you break it down in terms of, like, are you happy where it's at? Is it serving the population well? What's the plan long term from that aspect?
We just completed a study and made some changes on bus routes. And, the challenge with the bus system is that much of it is federally funded. So we are bound.
Strings.
There are strings. Yeah. And so for starters, a lot of people want us to go to areas that we can't because it's not city limits. Come to Rapid Valley. Well, I hate to tell you this, Rapid Valley is not part of city limits of Rapid City. If you all want to petition to become part of Rapid City, and, maybe those services, can get out there in that way. But and I think we have some bus services going up that way. But so we've recently added routes that were important, but these are all so timed, so specialty with aging buses, and you have a hard time finding bus drivers. And I mean, it's a challenge.
Yes.
But we just recently added some stops, Monument Health being one of them, which side of the street they get dropped off on. That was an important part of that. Oyate Health was a really big one.
Yes, that was important.
We had several council members over the years, myself included, and we were kind of told it really wasn't possible because there was federal land. I mean, it was difficult because Oyate Health sits on federal land, and we couldn't put it was like this goofy stuff, and we're like, we got to figure this out. It's got to be doable. Well, there's some changes that were made, and a lot of persistence to be done there. The one-stop shop, which is the Department of Health, the State Department of Health shop, kind of behind Lowe's over there. We added that to the mix, and that was a phone call from the Secretary of Health saying, hey, we got a lot of people who use our services out here. Can we have a bus stop out here? And that was part of that study and rerouting, and that we can work that in. And we also do youth rides free, so we have kids that ride free. Dial a ride if you need a specific ride. So we have a lot of folks especially those in wheelchairs and disabilities. I think is really helpful. So, I think some people it's socioeconomic purposes, but a lot of it's ability. So you have people who can work, just need to be able to get to work.
Yeah.
Journey On helps fill in a transportation gap in some ways that some people might use the bus system are now using, I think, Journey On to get to, a doctor's appointment or whatever. So, it's all critical. As our city continues to grow, we're always growing and changing. So we're going to constantly have to look at those bus routes, make sure they're efficient.
Are you happy with that?
I think I'd like to see expanded hours.
I would too.
It's expensive, and it's not as simple as you think it is. So
I'm sure
that's the problem, is just what you want. It's not that it can't be done, but I think some expanded hours, earlier mornings, later evenings, not 24/7. I don't think we need that at all, but I do think, there's some folks who work shift work or whatever the case may be. And I think that would be helpful to do. Would also take a whole lot of reworking. And
is this one of those build it and they will come kind of things? Like, is this a demand you see where it's at, you build out the lines? And
it's decent demand, but people aren't still choosing that. Like normal folks still want to drive in Rapid City. We're very independent minded. So if more of those people started using it, I think you'd almost have to we gotta change up our bus system here. But I can just tell you the school district's got a bus driver shortage. It's not an easy thing to do. Just because you want to do it doesn't mean there's people who want to do it, which is funny because it means there's jobs right now. Somebody can get a CDL, they can become a bus driver today. So there's opportunities all over the place in Rapid City for people who want to work. But the transportation to get there, I think we're pretty fortunate to have what we have for a city our size, but I think expanding the hours, always relooking at those stops, because the hot spots change in time, where if we get a new retail development, do we put something out there? But, we got a lot of bus stops around grocery stores. I think that's important. And you'll see that a lot. And I think as new housing developments happen and our city really expands, having those, we talked about, I want neighborhood elementary schools and parks, probably public transportation needs to be part of that discussion.
It's a big deal for a lot of our patients. Like it's, they can't afford or maintain or have a car, but they still need to get around it, especially some of the more independent ones that aren't kind of connected to other
senior citizens too.
For sure.
Yeah. I think that's a big one.
I'm mindful of time here, but I just have a few other things that I think might affect the landscape that I'm curious on. Larry Rhoden, he's going to be our new governor. It looks like
he is our new governor.
Yeah, I think that happened.
He got sworn in.
Just here. So, any effects on that for us? Probably not a huge thing, but
your relationship with the governor greatly impacts your city. If you have a poor relationship with the governor as a mayor,
it's bad.
It's bad.
Yeah,
and whatever your opinion is, you need to have a great relationship. I'm fortunate to say we have a great relationship with Governor Rhoden. I have a branding iron that he made. Actually, a friend of mine commissioned him to make it, so it's in my office. And he's a West River guy. Governor Rhoden has, I just saw him, last week, and he's so down to earth. Like, everybody just knows him as Larry. If you know him, he's Larry, but he's Governor Rhoden,
Mm-hmm.
And I told him, you need to wear that cowboy hat wherever you go. You got the John Dutton thing going on. And, we have a great relationship with him. I had a great relationship with Governor Nome. And frankly, that was to Rapid City's benefit. And we're grateful for everything she did for our community. And she knew what she was doing, picking Larry as her lieutenant governor, and he was ready to step in the saddle once she got her new assignment. And so I'm thrilled about it. He's going to have an inauguration here soon. He's already been sworn in because have to take, it's kind of a very quick thing, but we'll have an official inauguration for him. He'll finish out the term, and then in the meantime, he'll decide on his future. There's a lot of people lining up potentially to run for governor, a lot of names rumored, but he will have the inside track here, and he has 2 years to get a lot accomplished. He's going to name his lieutenant governor here soon. And that will have to be approved by the legislature because of the way the special, unique circumstances playing out. But we're thrilled for him.
Good.
He's a great guy.
So good for Rapid City.
He and I text each other. He's definitely good for Rapid City. He's great for South Dakota.
Great.
He's a steady hand.
Second issue that I think affects us a little bit that's kind of making its way through is the school voucher system. This is a very interesting topic, and it's a lot of strong opinions on this. Give me your 1,000-foot overview, pros, cons.
Yeah.
How you think the community here is gonna look at this?
Well, if anything changes, it'll change things for sure.
Yes.
I think there's been multiple bills that had been proposed. I think one did get killed. So I think the one that Governor Nome kind of put out there is the one they're working on. All right. So my vision for Rapid City, just so everybody knows, is I want it to be where kids thrive and families flourish. If they do, we all win. So that's how I measure success, not how big we get or what our GDP is or whatever the case may be. You could be 1 million people strong, but if kids aren't thriving, you actually are losing. And you actually will not have a city if you don't have children. So I want people to make babies, love their kids, raise them upright, and them to shine and thrive. So when it comes to education, I'm an all of the above. Okay. So whether it's public school, private school, homeschool, there are all sorts of little networks and hubs that are going on right now. And what helps kids thrive? I'm not as protective of systems. I'm more protective of children. So, however, the systems are important for the children, and I think there's a role for, whatever is going to work. So if we go with school choice, then I think and they might go small on that to see how it works before they roll it out big. I think that probably is what I've heard they're looking at. But if they do that, I do think they have to look at the funding formula for public schools to make sure that they can still keep up with what they have to do. And rural communities are a big part of that as well. This is not just the city thing, but the smaller communities. It hits us all a little bit differently. But I'm an all of the above. And so I think when you're talking about how those are paid for and stuff, I as a parent, I would have loved to have had assistance to send my kid to whatever school would help them grow. And so you have some kids who want to send their kids to like a Lakota school, and you have some kids who want to send them to Catholic school. I was just talking to Catholic schools yesterday. Our homeschool network here is like vibrant and producing like remarkable kids. Our public schools and our teachers are doing an outstanding job. And I think that's probably the one area is because even with property tax relief too, which I think we should have, well, half your property taxes go to the school districts.
Right.
So I think that funding formula of how that's paid for, which it's, half of it going to schools, but it's like your enrollment times this. I think that probably needs to be updated to make sure that the public schools are whole. But also implementing, the school choice deal. And I think that's probably got a good chance of passing. So being realistic, you may want to stop it. I'm sure there are people who want it absolutely stopped because they don't think that's the way it should go. But the idea of school choice is that your taxpayer dollars follow the kid, not the system.
Right.
So that's how that is. So there are pros and cons to that. There are going to be consequences to the public schools, and what does that mean in the long run? I want a strong education system all the way around. Both my kids went to public schools, by the way. I graduated from Rapid City area schools. My daughter's going to be a public school teacher. So I definitely want to see that happen, but I am not opposed to vouchers. I think we got to do it in a smart way. There's an expression from a book I read years ago by Jim Collins called not Good to Great. That was a great book, but Great by Choice. And he talks about this concept of fire bullets before cannonballs. So I do think when you make a massive change like this, hey, start small, see how it goes. If it works, then you can scale it bigger. And especially if you can figure out the funding formula for schools, I think they'll be okay. They'll be like, okay, well, at least we can still pay our bills and pay our teachers and update our schools. But you recognize some of that money is going to go somewhere else. So you might see not as many public schools over time. Or if the public schools are awesome and it's competition and it steps up their game, maybe the competition will be good. But you already have a robust, system. We have challenges though, man. Talking to our superintendent here, Dr. Saucer, I think like this kindergarten screening used to be like, can you tie your shoe and things like that. A lot of kids coming into kindergarten aren't even potty trained. Not all, but like it's a scary number of increased kids. So it really boils down to the family. And so what does that look like? And the schools are really bearing the brunt of a lot of issues. And so that's why I think if they're going to do that, I think they need to look at the funding formula. I do think the school districts will have to innovate as well. But I think there's a way where all this can happen. My thing is, where is this working well in the rest of the country? There are places I think it probably is not working well, and places it is working well for the kids. And look at them. We don't have to reinvent the wheel on this, but it will impact us in a unique way.
Yeah, from a healthcare standpoint, it was quite an interesting lesson to see what happened nationally when schools shut down during COVID. And then we realized, my goodness, school's actually the safe place for a lot of kids.
Yeah.
Like that was something that I think
It was my safe place.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which is kind of a realization a lot of us probably don't appreciate, So it's interesting. I like that. I think it'd be wonderful to have more choice as long as the public schools don't get hurt. I bet that's what most citizens feel.
I think so. How do you do that?
Right.
And that's the thing is it's going to cost money. And you're talking about also property tax relief. So here's one thing is you say, okay, well, one of the property tax bills the legislature is considering is offsetting our property taxes, which we would all love, but offsetting it by adding 2 cents of sales tax, state sales tax. Now that's interesting because now you get 3.8 million visitors to help pay that. Now, would you have even more money coming in than you would with the property taxes? And could that go to education to help
tax
offset?
Alcohol more.
Well, you know what, dude? I think, Sheriff Mueller is looking at a jail expansion and some things like that. And, those are options that are potentially on the table, but you'll have a big lobby up against that.
Yeah.
So we'll see. The state legislature is so important, by the way. It governs so much of even how we do things in the city of Rapid City. So you talk about the relationship with the governor, and that needs to be healthy. But, to have Rapid City, we have our representatives, but we have to really build relationships with East River legislators to let them know why Rapid City matters to you. And it matters, I think, because of tourism and agriculture, that you get the benefit, too, of what we do here. So we're constantly trying to educate people about why Rapid City matters to the entire state of South Dakota.
Absolutely. And on that, I think it'd be a good spot to end. I think the term comprehensive plan is thrown around a lot. I think it's a forward-looking vision for 2035, if I remember right, and it's part of your budget and it's kind of laid out on the official website. Can you describe that? And in 2035, probably long after our times from this positions, where do you hope that we're at? What are the things you're most excited about?
So we're working on that comprehensive plan. It's a very community-wide effort. So it's not just my opinions of where I want things to go. We will have to take care of a lot of issues. We have an airport that needs desperate need of expansion. It brings $453 million of economic impact a year. I want to see that airport expanded and ready to remain relevant. Without an airport, you're irrelevant. And by the way, well, I don't care about that. Well, your taxes are going to go up or you're not going to have services. The only way to keep taxes in check is to have the economy grow. So I want us to be, a safe community. I want us to keep what makes us special. To me, it's not just like the stores we'll have or the neighborhoods we'll build. I know which direction we're probably going to grow as a city. But for me, it's about keeping that thing that makes us special. I have zero intention or desire to be another generic mid-sized city that looks like everybody else. Mm-hmm. Why? We are uniquely Rapid City. There's pros and cons, just like every place has the same thing. Let's lean into who we are. I think there's the agricultural roots, the family values. If those things are happening, if kids are thriving in 10 years, then I'll be excited. But for kids to thrive, that means you're going to have strong families. That means that you're going to have a great education system, whatever that looks like. And I believe there's innovation coming. I believe you have to have good paying job for their families to provide. You have to have homes for them to live in. You have to have an economy that works for them, meaning places to spend money and to buy and circulate and exchange goods and all of that. You have to have great health care to take care of them and make sure that they're healthy for everything that is to come. You're going to have I think you have to have fun, and Rapid City is a fun place, and I think we should lean into that. I love Dinosaur Park in the middle of our city for a lot of reasons. It's unique that we just have a dinosaur in our hill.
It's great.
But it's whimsical, and I think, you know what? That's Rapid City.
Yes.
We love to play and have fun, and I think Rapid City should always have fun. I think the things we should lean into that. This is where adventure lives. Whether you're going to start a business or whether you're going to climb a hill, you can do it here. And I think that part of it, we're a Mountain West community, leaning into that, staying true to who we are. And yeah, the buildings and structures that we will have and the neighborhoods we're going to create, we will grow. We will grow to the east, we will grow to the north, and we'll grow a little bit southwest. But ultimately, it's about what you do within those city limits. It's not just about that growth. But I think this is gonna be a regional thing. You're gonna see Rapid City probably hit 100,000 people. We could probably almost do it today if we wanted to annex some places in, but the metro area is roughly 150, not including Spearfish. So it's a growing community. The more and more it's on the map, the more and more attractive it will be. I want to see businesses, though, grow here. Like I think when that happens, we all win, but it takes quality of life. Everything connects with each other. That's what you realize. You're not going to grow, for example, if your healthcare system's not great. You're not going to grow if public safety is an issue and people don't feel safe walking downtown. You're not going to grow if your education system and your schools are falling apart. You're not going to grow if kids are running wild and families don't care about them. All of these things are going to play a factor. Mm-hmm. But so I always get back to that: when do kids thrive and families flourish? If they do, that is the foundational thing. That's everything we're doing is to that end. So we want to make it fun. We make sure there's opportunities here. We want every child to pursue their potential. They're going to be the adults, the next generation, who are hopefully doing it for the next generation after them. So I very much think about the next generation. If you can tell I want more sports facilities here. I'm big on hosting tournaments and youth sports, not just for the region, but for ourselves. And so you'll see efforts towards that end. You'll see a lot of those sort of things. And that is really with that in mind. Like, hey, kids got to thrive here, and this is a fun place.
Absolutely. Well, Mayor, I thank you for your time. I think I speak for a large swath of folks who are rooting for your success and appreciate your very committed efforts. Well,
I appreciate it. It's an honor to serve. It's an off-road adventure every day. It's got its ups and downs, but I'm very grateful for this. It's an exciting time in Rapid City. To be leading at a time we've never seen before. And so, trying to do the best we can. try to do it with what wisdom and courage and boldness and caring and all of that, I think, is always a challenge. So I'll do my best. I'll fail from time to time. I'll stumble from time to time, but I greatly love this community, believe in us, and I think what makes it special are the people who've lived here.
Perfect.
Yeah. All
We'll
right.
call her there.
Thank you.
That was fun.